Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Only Murders in the Building, Season 1, Episode 5. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we find out the identity of Tie-Dye Hoodie. It's Oscar, which I guess shouldn't be too much of a surprise. I figured it had to be Oscar, but I didn't figure it out until the moment the voiceover happened. I was like, oh, this is Oscar. The fact is he's following Mabel and stuff. I figured he's not going to kill her, but it's like, right, you did go up to, and especially later on when he was telling Mabel, like, oh, I came to see him. I was like, you're lying. You went to see Tim, which we know he did. And I was like, right, I figured what was going to happen was he was going to show up and Tim was already dead. What we find out later on in the episode is that, in fact, he was actually there when Tim died. He was actually in front of the door, but then he ducked in someone else's apartment. So he probably never actually got to see if the killer actually exited, because I think he was still under the impression that Tim killed himself, so, but, which I also love they brought that whole thing back, because when Mabel jumped on top of him, because when he was following her, she was about to stab him with a knitting needle, and she's like, yeah, I've always wanted to kill someone like that, and you're like, yeah, I love they brought that little element back from the first episode when she, fantasizes and dreams about that. I mean, it legitimately helps her go to sleep. But I thought it was an interesting development along with all of that Charles and Oliver, and now that they found out from Will about the truth about Mabel and her connection to Tim, and obviously the death that happened all those years ago, to some extent. They didn't really get all the ins and outs, but Oliver is quick to be like, oh yeah, it was her, she did it, but Charles isn't so quickly to jump on that bandwagon. I interpreted it a little bit differently than what Oliver did, because I thought it was interesting. My perspective on it was, I thought Mabel kind of fueled a little bit of that Lucy thing, especially because we learned so much about Lucy last episode that I thought maybe that's where Mabel kind of comes in, and it kind of coincides with what Oliver said. He just kind of came from it from a different angle, because he hasn't gotten her Charles' story yet, so we know because of the story, but Oliver doesn't. But Oliver says, right, you want to believe the best in Mabel because you are someone who's lived your life so closed off that you finally opened up a little bit more because Mabel got you to do that, and now you don't want to believe the worst in her because of that. And I think that is kind of filling that Lucy void a little bit, because truth be told is he hasn't seen Lucy in a little while, and once again, her and Mabel would be different ages, but I'm sure a lot of who Mabel is probably reminds him. It probably revitalized him, just because he probably been feeling lonely without Lucy in his life, because obviously he still loves and cares about her, like she was his own daughter, and maybe Mabel kind of fills that void to some extent. So I think it's a combination of what I was thinking plus Oliver. But like I said, at the time I didn't think about it. I was like, right, Oliver doesn't know about Lucy. He doesn't know about Charles' story, because that's also something Oliver's not really thought about too much. They aren't that open with each other. None of them fully knows each other's story and circumstances. Oliver has kind of told Charles a little bit about his money situation and his splash and how that kind of all blew up. Charles opened up to his to the bassoonist. Now they're going to go on their second date and stuff, but they haven't really opened up, and obviously Mabel's kept a lot to herself, and we really haven't found out why. But I mean, I guess you can kind of infer the reason why is because she kind of goes into it a little bit, but this is so personal to her because Tim was part of her crew, part of her Hardy Boys, and she that disappeared for so long. Zoe's death, Oscar going to jail, her and Tim not being around each other for 10 years. And now Tim's dead, and it's the only ones left are her and Oscar. So, and even then she kind of felt like she didn't even have Oscar, because her dad was like, yo, stay away from my son. He needs a fresh start. Don't ever come back here again. So, for Mabel, this is so important, finding out what happened to Tim, because yes, he might not have been her friend currently, but they still had history, and connecting this all because she knows that Tim also saw who killed Zoe all those years ago. So it's it's all kind of connected to some extent. So she wanted to get justice for her friends. So I'm assuming what Tim was looking into probably was ultimately connected to maybe what happened to Zoe, but we'll get to. I think it's. Well, I'll go ahead and jump in and talk about it, because basically, this all involves Oscar and Mabel going to meet. She thought the GM had to deal with a juror, which, yes, it does have to deal with jewelry, and it's understandable why she would make that mistake. But it turns out the GM was in reference to her cousin, who gave them their whale tattoos, the Hardy Boy tattoo. And it's like, right, Mabel was like, how did I not even put that together? Because it's like her cousin Tavo is like his nickname, but his name's like, was it like Gustine Amaro or something like that? And it's like, right, she's like, how did I not piece that together? Sometimes the most obvious thing kind of slips. I guess it's like, right, you're so used to calling your cousin by his nickname and you wouldn't even piece that together. I thought it was suspicious that Oscar was pointing her in that direction, so I was like, he probably, is he trying, because like when they actually got there later on, he didn't want to go inside. I thought he'd immediately get recognized or something like that about what, because I was thinking like maybe this has something to do with the jury on Oscar's part, but it's like, no, Oscar was more so involved with like just being, because he wanted to confront him. He was like, I might even wanted to fuck him up a little bit, but I wasn't going to kill him. Because he's like, yeah, he knows that, because him and Mabel probably talked about that Tim knew exactly who did it and didn't say anything, for 10 years. So, but what we find out is that Tim was trying to expose this this person named Angel, who's this black market jewelry dealer or whatever. So now you're like, okay, if we know anything about Zoe was that she liked to pick up jewelry. That was kind of like her thing. Like I don't know if it was full blown kleptomania, but like she definitely like kind of leaned more towards shiny stuff. Kind of interesting in like the Hardy Boys lane. There's Bess from Nancy Drew, the show. She kind of has a thing for shiny things, a little kleptomania. So it's interesting, just parallel to kind of think about. But I think Zoe either stole from the wrong person, which might have been Angel, meaning she might be someone that lives in the Arconia, or she had some, or maybe Zoe secretly was stealing for her back then. Maybe she wanted a bigger piece of the pie and ended up getting killed, and that maybe Tim wanted to keep his mouth shut because maybe he has some connection to Angel, or maybe he was threatened. Because we know he has some financial issues now, but maybe there was some stuff that came up later. I mean, way back then, that maybe that's why he kept his mouth shut, because maybe he got paid off. But maybe that's why he wants to take down Angel, because Angel had something to do with Zoe's death, and it would have been the thing that, yes, he's out of prison, but at the very least, it would clear Oscar's name in the process, so he would owe it to both of them. So maybe that's why he kept Mabel at a distance, because he didn't want her to know the truth, because he's like, if I told you the truth, like, you'd get involved in this, and I wanted to keep you safe. Or maybe his confrontation with her is what sparked this in him, because he said, I forgot when Tavo had said he had come in. Was it like the week before or something like that? But Tim knew potentially he was going to get murdered, which I love when the whole situation with Charles being like, okay, Tavo, can I call you Tavo? And Oliver's like, well, what else would you call him? It's like, well, I don't know if that was like a nickname, and might be some affectionate nickname, and I don't want to like overstep my boundaries or anything like that. I love that. But jumping around, I've skipped over quite a bit, but I love that the fact is, like I brought up, like they don't really know each other well. Like Oliver and Charles on their little road trip following Oscar and Mabel was them kind of getting to know each other. Like he's like, oh, I haven't, like, the first time I'm leaving Manhattan in like 5 years, and it's just me going to Long Island. And I would have the fondest memories here. And they both went back and forth about like the STDs or STIs that they've gotten. And then like Oliver starts singing a song about like what was it, like long ball sacks or something like that. And just like Charles being like, God, that's going to be stuck in my head all day when he's singing that. I do like that they also meet with Lucian, and the fact is he's so quick to be like, yo, hop in. And I love his cousin's like, all right, I got to hang up. My cousin picked up 2 white guys. And it's Roy Wood Jr. I'm like, hey. But it's like, yeah, they do like a podcast. They're like, hey, we're podcasters too. It's like, yeah, we got like 60,000 subscribers. We were named like a new up and coming podcast and stuff. And like Oliver was trying to flex a little bit, like, oh, we're doing a murder podcast about a murder in our building. And then the moment they hear that 60,000, it's like, oh, to our last time we checked 4 listeners. And it's just kind of like, oh. It's like, oh, well, we know Cinda. They're like, oh, Sin, yeah. She's like the third honorary member of our. The only green she likes more than money is our like plants for like their podcasts and stuff. And it's just like you see how downtrodden and just like broken hearted Oliver is, because he was like, oh, he's trying to flex a little. It's like, yeah, this is okay, because he was almost like, oh, that's sweet, yeah. And then he found out their numbers and everything. It's like, oh, wow. They're like, yeah, they're a new podcast, yet they're like spiking, and we're a new podcast and we're fizzling out, you know? But I also love the whole, like, him recording and everything. I love that whole speech. Like I said, I had talked about it earlier, the whole thing he had said about, oh, I know why you like Mabel, because you were so closed off. And he's like, oh, I gotta say that again. It sounded so fake. And Charles is like, you fucker. I love it. Because I haven't watched every Steve Martin movie, so him cursing kind of throws me for a loop because I'm not used to it. I'm sure if you go back, because I'm trying to remember what was the actual last Steve Martin movie. I don't know, Tom, like maybe Bringing Down the House with Queen Latifah might be the last one I remember seeing. Nothing against Steve Martin, but I'm trying to think, that might be the last movie I've ever seen. And that was like years ago. I think we had that on DVD back at home. Might have been that. It also depends, like, because it also correlates with, like, the Cheaper by the Dozen movies. I'm trying to remember when they came out. I think both of them come out after that? Because I think Bringing Down the House was, like, 2003, and I think the Cheaper by the Dozen, like, 1 and 2 might have been, like, later, like a year or two. I don't remember. But, yeah, like, either Bringing Down the House or one of the Cheaper by the Dozen movies might have been the last thing I've seen them. That's probably something more recent that I'm just not remembering. It's just, once again, it's just like, I just don't remember him ever cussing, so like him swearing kind of throws me for a loop for a little bit. I mean, obviously I'm not 100% used to it with Selena Gomez either, so it just kind of like, you know, when she, especially like her character's, like Mabel's dry delivery of stuff, you know? Especially like the whole like making fun of Oscar being like, oh yeah, this is strawberry lube. It's like, oh, I forgot, that kind of made you have a reaction last time. He was like, oh, this one. And the guy's like, we have bubblegum lube. And they're like, and she's like, yeah, you're going to need, condoms, you know, thin but extra long. And this guy's like, okay, like, I love that, like, Mabel's just so messed up for messing with him like that. And the guy, when they walked away, the guy's almost like, one of two reactions, like, kind of like, wait, aren't you going to buy this stuff? Or it's like, wait, you got all this stuff and you're not even buying it. I'm going to have to put this back, you dicks. So, but I guess there was always, because wasn't there always, well, I don't know if there was never really like a thing between Tim and Mabel kind of like that. It makes me wonder, because of the whole Oscar thing, like, I forgot, they kind of hinted to it, didn't they? That, yeah, no, that's what they were kind of hinting at, that there was kind of an Oscar and Mabel thing, even when he was dating Zoe, that there was a little bit of a complication there. So, I think Mabel's the one he's always secretly been in love with, but he was with Zoe, and their relationship was probably not, as we can kind of tell from her personality, a little bit we got to see with her. Zoe probably wasn't the best person, but yeah, it's just probably wasn't the best relationship, and it's just like probably didn't help that he was secretly in love with Mabel the entire time, and I think she felt it too. So, but I do like the confrontation in the tattoo shop, and Mabel's like, wait, you were following me? It's like, yeah, but you lied to us. And she does apologize. It's like, yeah, everyone's kind of a little in the wrong. I mean, to be fair, they found out about you, but now she's like, oh, you're suspecting me? He's like, no, I'm just confused. To be fair, Oliver's the one that kind of immediately assumed the worst in you. Oscar shows up, and it's like, oh, here's some vegan something ice cream, and just like, oh, I love Oliver being like, oh, fucking millennials, leave it up to them to ruin. Like, what's wrong with basic ice cream? It's like, I'll take the popsicle, gets brain freeze. Oscar's like, no, put your thumb in the roof of your mouth. I'm like, I've never heard of that before. And he's like, ooh, tie-dye's a genius. I just love that. So that's interesting. But then, like I said, we got the angle of Angel and the black market dealing with, like, the stolen jewelry that Tim ended up collecting. So I was wondering, because, like, once again, it seemed like that was a Zoe thing, so him having all the jewelry kind of took me by surprise. I'm like, why would he be doing that? Was he stealing that from people in the building little by little, or was he stashing stuff at his place as kind of an in with Angel and them, you know? Because it seems like Angel's like the one person. I don't think that was a group or that. I think it's one person, but, you know, it's probably a whole operation. But interesting to note, once again, whether that's out of the Arconia, which makes you go like, right, it's so, because I'm wondering now, is the person that Mabel was over the dead body of, could that have been Angel's body, whoever it is? Like, are we going to find out, like, is it Bunny? Is she actually Angel? I feel like once again, it has to be someone within the Arconia, like, but I mean, it could be someone outside of, but it just seems like that ends up being the centerpiece to it. Also, goes into what I was talking about before, where I was like wondering whether Arconia would be like I mean, it's going to be the main, setting for everything, because it fits into the title of the show, which I even love. Like, they were like, oh, like that podcast they were referencing, like the one episode called Daddy's Little Helper. It's like, yeah, it was kind of not a great episode because the title kind of spoiled it off. I mean, oh, Daddy's Little Helper, I wonder who helped, so it ended up being like the like son or something like that, because that's what Oliver was trying to compare Mabel to, which I love. Like, both Lucian and his cousin had two different perspectives. His cousin Vaughn had two different perspectives on it. Vaughn was like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't assume the worst, maybe there's more to it. And Lucian's like, or maybe she's like mistletoe, which is interesting to know that about mistletoe. It's like, yeah, it's this symbol of, oh, you kiss underneath it, but it's poisonous to the tree that it hangs from. I'm like, oh, interesting. That was just kind of an interesting analogy, kind of almost comparing Selena Gomez to, which, the nerdness timing is almost like poison ivy. I was just thinking for a second, I was like, oh, would she ever, I was like, which immediately made me pause and go like, Selena Gomez in the DC universe as a character. I'll save that for something else, but I was just like, oh, Selena Gomez is Poison Ivy, huh? That just kind of got stuck in my tangents and all that side. Getting back to the actual show we're talking about, I'm very interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, finding out more about this angel, and just everyone kind of in on this together. I guess Oscar's going to be a part of the investigation, potentially from now on. I'm curious how his father's going to feel about that, because it's interesting, because obviously Oscar's got a lot to deal with. I mean, he's like, yeah, he's out of prison and, all the things he wants to do, but it's still the situation of, despite all that, he still kind of feels like he's trapped in a prison himself because of everything. I think a prison of the past and not wanting to kind of face that past, because Mabel's like, right, I'll go face this alone, and I guess he didn't want her to. He's like, right, she's doing this for my sake and Tim's sake, and just trying to get justice for me, Zoe, and everything. So it's like, right, how can I ask her to go at this alone, especially when he, actually really deeply cares about her. So it's going to be interesting to see where the investigation ends up taking us going forward from here. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.